councillors. It's lovely to be here. It is lovely for me to be in your new building for the first time. It is stunning, and it's great to see you've still got a wonderful view of the Maunga and the Moana out there. Chris McLeay, Chief Executive, Waikato Regional Council. I've been there 25 years. I've been the last 6 years as the Chief Executive. With me, Mali Ahapene. She's part of my executive team. She looks after our governance functions, and she also is our Pautohono, leads our Tauranga Whenua unit, which is our iwi staff and our iwi relationships throughout the region. Apologies from our chair, Warren Ma. He's taking a rest. He's flying over to Australia as we speak. But I think, me, John, that he's met with yourself and Julie in the last week or so. What I've been doing is I've talked to the Mayoral Forum twice about regional council functions, and I've been invited to most of the councils around the Waikato region so far to talk about them. What's been apparent is elected members haven't fully understood what we do. So this is just an impartial, objective opportunity for you to, at a high level, understand what we do. There's probably an opportunity to talk about, as you're thinking through what proposals, if any, I have seen the media, I know what's on your mind, that you think about an opportunity to, you obviously got to think about what governance arrangements would look like going forward as well. Marley's been working with our chair on different models for which could work, and Marley will probably just briefly discuss some of that work as well. So I'll just start off by getting everybody in the same place on what the Waikato region is. You will well know the southern part of our region. It is your district. The Waikato region is defined by geography and catchments, and that was put into place through the local government reforms in 1989 and to meet the requirements of resource management, of the Resource Management Act of 1991. The water that flows off the some of the southern flanks of, the western flanks of Mount Ruapehu, the eastern flanks I should say, and flows down into the Tongariro River is what defines our boundary in the south. And of course it comes up around your catchment boundary, around the Lake Taupō catchment, goes up past Tauhara. Obviously Broadlands Reparoa is in our region. We go up to this side of Rotorua City, so Rotorua City isn't, as you know. We skirt around Mamaku, the small town on the plateau just north of Rotorua, is in the Rotorua district, but just past that is the catchment boundary. And then the region heads up the Kaimai-Mamaku range, goes up to Waihi. So Waihi town is in the Waikato region, Waihi beach isn't. There's a small catchment dividing line through there, takes in the whole of the Coromandel, goes up the other side of the Firth of Thames. A lot of the Henua Ranges are in the Waikato region. The dams for Auckland are in the Waikato region. They didn't used to be, but they got put back in about 2014 through a change to the Local Government Act. The way that water flows off the hills at Bombay and flows down towards the Waikato River defines our catchment boundary in the north. Just north of Port Waikato, Glenbrook Steel Mill isn't in our region, it's in Auckland, but just south of that it defines the northern extent on the west coast, and we go down to Moko down at the bottom of the west and then back across into what would define the northern part of your district. So 2.5 million hectares. What people often overlook is it also includes the coastal marine areas out to 12 nautical miles. So on that map you can see the blue area, that is also part of the Waikato region, so we administer out that far. That adds about another half of our region is offshore. So when we're talking about the Waikato region, that's what we are defining it as. And obviously, as you would know, strategically very important, partly because of its proximity to Auckland and the port up there where a lot of imports come into New Zealand, the port of Tauranga where a lot of exports go out of, with the main arterial routes of South Highway 1 and the main rail trunk coming through the region. But as I go to some length to remind people, we have two other ports, one at Taranaki, one at Hawke's Bay, which is also within proximity of the Waikato region, and they are very important for the resilience of New Zealand if anything went wrong with the other northern ports. As a region, we're about 10% of New Zealand's land area, 20% of the North Island. We're about 10% of New Zealand's GDP, and we've got about 10% of New Zealand's population. Where we do punch above our weight somewhat is in the export markets for primary industries, where we're well above that 10%. And as we all know, those export markets are critically important for New Zealand. So the Waikato region, blessed with a great climate, blessed with great natural features and soils, means that primary industry is very important. Offshore, the aquaculture industry is a growing, burgeoning industry as well, and that's also very important to the region. You'll be very familiar with the energy generation. You're kind of at the heart of it all around here. About just under 40% of New Zealand's energy generation is generated in the Waikato. Gets absolutely critical in times of low flow in the South Island. And we have the hydro system, which the Tongariro Power Diversion, the dams down the Waikato River. We've got thermal with Huntly, which is dependent on the outflows of Lake Karapiro. And of course we've got that increasingly important base load for New Zealand, which is the geothermal resource. All important here. I just want to acknowledge the importance of other renewable energies and solar, which is coming in, of which is going to be huge in your district. Flood infrastructure, we've got about $1 billion worth of flood infrastructure in the Waikato region. I'll talk a bit more about that later, protecting about $2.5 billion worth of GDP. Something that's a little bit lesser known is the importance of mining in aggregate in the Waikato region. It is New Zealand's biggest producer of aggregate and mining. So there's a lot of quarries. A lot of quarries have probably helped build Auckland in the past. But mining is equally important, and it's not just the likes of the gold and the Coromandel and silver and so on, of which there is a lot more. But the iron sands off the west coast of the North Island, the three biggest ships that come into New Zealand come and tie up to a buoy that's about 3.5 kilometres offshore, just south of Kāwhia, and every 2 weeks one of those ships comes in and exports iron sands off to Asia. Very important source of revenue for New Zealand in the Waikato region. With Head Start proposals, one of the things you have got to give consideration to, and this is a big consideration in the Waikato, is catchment management, and particularly some of the catchment functions of the Regional Council. There's two large catchments in the Waikato region. One of them is the largest one in New Zealand, and it's the Waikato Waipa catchment, of which your district is at the head of, and the other is the Waiho-Piako, which runs out into Firth Thames. So that, as you can see, defines a lot of our region. Just outside of that, there's also Thames Coromandel, where there's shorter run rivers and catchments that run to the east or west, depending which side of the Coromandel that they're on. And then we've got a large swathe of land down the west coast, where there tend to be shorter run rivers and catchments running out into the west coast. We have more local government in the Waikato region than anywhere else in New Zealand. In fact, 15% of New Zealand's local government is here, which makes the considerations for any local government reform, which I know that you're thinking very seriously and deeply about, more interesting in many ways. I often described the Waikato region as a large rural provincial region with the fastest growing city in New Zealand. So that's the dynamic that we work in.
Chris, are you happy to take questions during your presentation, or do you prefer to wait to the end?
Probably best to wait to the end, just in case I cover it on the way. The thing about the Waikato Waipa catchment, which I think is critically important and is not well understood throughout New Zealand, there's several things. Firstly, 20% of the water that comes into Lake Taupō is sourced from outside the catchment. Now, I know you'll be aware of that, many others aren't. And that translates into 10% of the water that flows out at the Waikato River into the Tasman Sea at Port Waikato. 10% of the water is actually sourced from outside the catchment, from the Whanganui River. And that's critically important. It's critically important for water management, be it water allocation and how water gets allocated right down the length of the river, and remembering that water goes off to Auckland at the lower reaches. It's also important for water quality management. The more water that's taken out of the system, the more water in the system is effectively better for water quality. The second feature is obviously energy management, because energy management is linked to that water. That's why we've got the extra diversion coming in. Very few people understand the Rangapō and the Turangi-Tongariro power diversion, and how the water is managed through the potential energy cascades down through the dams on the Waikato River. The minimum flow which comes out of Lake Karapiro, the lower dam, is set so that there's enough water that flows past Huntly, so when it's got to burn at full noise to keep the lights on in Upper North Island, that there's sufficient water for cooling the water out of Huntly. So that's kind of how the whole set of the systems worked. Without that, effectively everything would get cooked in the lower Waikato River. The third thing is flood protection management in the Waikato Waipa, because when it rains and there's flood peaks coming down the Waikato system and the Waipa system, we have to work very closely with the energy companies, both Genesis at the top end at Tongariro, with Mercury water going down through all the dams, to try and ensure that any peaks coming down don't coincide with the Waipa peaks, because it has a big impact on the lower Waikato. And as I said before, we've got a large value of flood protection assets in the lower Waikato. That's stop banks, flood pumps and floodgates and so on. We also have it in the Waihope Arcole, but it's more complicated in the Waikato system. And of course we've also got the flood assets in the upper part of the system around Turangi and the Tauranga Taupō. The fourth thing that's another layer of how we manage water in the catchment is the river treaty settlements. So we've got 6 treaty settlement partners engaged with those treaty settlements, who we need to work with to manage the whole system and achieve the Te Ture Whaimana, which is the vision and strategy for the Waikato River and its catchments. And we as a council, and I'll give a bit more information on this probably next slide, in fact I might just wait for that, work with iwi throughout the region. We've got those settlements in the Waikato Waipa catchment areas. We deal with 178 treaty settlement obligations throughout the region. We've got 215 joint management agreement obligations that we need to work with, and Marley and her team work with us. We have 27 co-managed land agreements we work with iwi on, and they're the current ones. That's not the ones that are pending. And the reason I say this is that catchment management side is something that you need to give consideration to in any proposals that you need to think about going forward. You'll also need to think, the government has said in the Head Start proposals, you need to think about these treaty settlement obligations and how they're going to be met. So Waikato Tainui, their rohi, which is mainly at the other end of the Waikato system, have interests in the awa right up into the headwaters. Similarly, Te Kotahitanga and Ngāti Tuwharetoa have interest right down the river system, down to the Port Waikato. And so these are things you need to consider. Of course, your district is defined, makes it a little bit more complicated, I guess, because you're part of additional catchments in different regions, be it the Mohaka or the Rangataiki or the Whanganui and so on. So I guess that in your considerations, the government said you need to consider catchment management functions in your proposals. You'll be needing to think about how you give effect to catchment management across those different boundaries. Interesting times. I'll just now go through some of the key functions, and I'm just going to do these at a high level. One of those functions to do with environmental monitoring and science and data, I'll just show you what sits underneath that, so you can see what sits under some of these high-level functions, just to give you a bit of a feel for the functions that you need to be thinking about, and particularly with the catchment and transport functions. So we are an environmental agency responsible for domains of air, land, water, coastal and marine and so on. We are required to put policies and plans in place. We have a regional policy statement, partly that your district plan needs to give effect to, but we also have our own regional plan under statute, which has to give effect to that regional policy statement as well. And we have a coastal plan. And the coastal plan deals with both the east and west coast. So any new local government arrangements need to think about how that's going to work. Obviously, there's going to be a new spatial plan that will be needed to be put through by us all within 15 months of royal assent of the new legislation going through, and then 2 years after that, we need to have a new environment plan for the whole region. Now, this is a time that might get interesting if there's been some local government reform within that time. We need to transition our regional plan, or whatever the agency is, will need to transition the current regional plan into that new regional plan, and of course the district plans need to be transitioned into the new chapters as well. So that's from we also have interregional strategies. We work with other regional councils and Auckland Council and Tauranga across the Upper North Island at a greater scale of planning as well. We put into place strategies. Some of you might be aware we've just signed off a new regional energy strategy in the absence of there being a national one to try and help plan for the energy generation in the future. We've just signed off a regional water security strategy to allow for the fact that some parts of our region are going to be wetter, some parts are going to be drier. It's going to create issues across the region. A new biodiversity strategy and so on. We currently have just under 14,000 active consents that we administer, and on top of that, there's a whole lot of permitted activities. Now, under the new planning regime that the government's about to announce, there will probably be less consented activities and a whole lot more permitted activities. But what the government said they're going to be proposing is those new permitted activities are going to have all sorts of conditions attached to them. There's going to have to be registration of those with councils, and so there's going to be an expectation of a whole lot more monitoring. At the moment, we monitor about 1,000 of those consents a year, and they tend to be the highest priority ones. And in addition to that, we respond to about 1,400 notifications of incidents that we have staff respond to with an incident response team. So that's the kind of the regulatory part of the organisation. We also do state of environment monitoring. I'll just unpack this a little bit more in a minute. We have about 1,250 sites that we monitor mainly on a monthly basis, and then we try and turn that data, if you like, into information through some of our scientists and GIS people and so on, so that information can be used for purposes like developing new policy, understanding the state of the environment, making information available for others like yourselves to make decisions. Our transport functions, that's something that Head Start says that you need to give consideration of in any proposals. So we are responsible under statute for having a regional land transport plan, passenger transport plan and so on. I know that one of you are involved in the Regional Transport Committee in terms of that planning. At the moment that's got about $12 billion of transport priorities set in it. But I guess the biggest spend, and I'll show you some of the finances shortly at a high level, is certainly in the operational spend, particularly buses. We have about 4 million passenger journeys per year. A lot of that's in Hamilton. We also have interregional rail. You might be aware we're in the last year of a trial of Te Huia, which is a commuter train running from Hamilton to Auckland. And we'll then see if the government is interested in funding any of that work, and our council's interested in funding any of that work going forward. We run total mobility and community transport programs, and we have road safety education programs as well. Catchment management, it's difficult to know exactly what the government is referring to when they say you need to give consideration to catchment management in your proposals. It's easy to think it's just flood protection and management. Catchment management is far wider than that. There's probably no district in its history that land management's been more important than the Taupō district. You know, those soil conservation schemes that were put in the 1950s and 60s, because when land was cleared and it rained overnight, you know, large swathes of the land were eroded very easily given the pernicious nature of it. And we have many, I can't tell you how many actually, land information agreements in place for farmers to ensure those soil conservation measures are kept in place. We have a lot of, our staff do a lot of work with farmers to right throughout the region to keep the soil on them there hills. Also, we provide a lot of incentive planting for riparian planting around streams and rivers, and for fencing to keep for stock exclusion. Flood protection, we've got a length of stop banks in the Waikato region, which is the equivalent of the distance from Whangarei to Wellington. So we maintain the integrity of those stop banks 24/7. We have a length of drains in the region which is equivalent to the length of the country that we administer. So we have to keep those board drains and the schemes within them clear to remove water to prevent flooding of towns and productive land. Of the 16,000 kilometres of streams and rivers, we actively work on about 1,000 kilometres a year. And you know, if you think what type of work that is, think of the Tongariro sort of scheme, where we need to try and keep the river as best we can within its banks, and some of the issues with the bed load building up and so on. Under the biosecurity laws, we are required to have a regional pest management plan. It has what are our priority pests that we can work on. We have 75 declared pests in that. We could have many, many more. It's just that there's only so much resource that we can put effort into. Plant pests, animal pests and diseases. I'd say that the most notifications of anything that come into our council, the most phone calls or emails that we get, is to do with biosecurity related matters, and mainly plant pests of interest. But you also need to think diseases and so on. So if PSA arrives, we work with Biosecurity New Zealand at a national level for new incursions. Golden Clam's another example. They are the lead agency. They work with us regionally to try and deliver stuff locally. The latest one is the new strain of the avian bird flu, which has now been 3 locations in Australia that's been detected. It's a matter of time before it gets here. Could have quite a big impact on the native bird population, the poultry industry, as well as other agricultural activities, actually, as it turns out. And that'll be nationally led. They will work with us regionally to help coordinate how to manage things locally, and we'll be talking with some of your staff about how this will occur. Biodiversity, very important for the Waikato region, those bits that where there's native flora and fauna. We work with about 125 community volunteer groups throughout the region and give money out to assist those groups to maintain biodiversity and enhance. I talked about we work with our iwi partners and the obligations of that before. Obviously our council's involved in other aspects of community leadership. We've just signed off a regional economic development strategy, which obviously your sub-regional strategies align with, and that's how to grow the Waikato region as a whole going forward. We're involved with regional resilience, identifying natural hazards, what are the risks and how they can be minimised or mitigated. Our maritime navigation safety role's an interesting one for yourselves, because obviously for Lake Taupō there's a different arrangement in place through previous settlements, and it's the Department of Internal Affairs responsible for navigation safety on the lake. But as soon as you get out into the River Rhine system, we have the maritime officers and harbour masters responsible for inland waters, for all waterways in the region and for the coastal marine area. We have about 1,200 navigation aids. We have about 160,000 recreational boaties, many who might come in from Auckland during summer months who may or may not understand how to keep themselves safe from each other, let alone other waterway users. We have responsibilities under the Civil Defence and Emergency Management Act for, we host the group, of which is governed by a joint committee across the region, which one of you will be on. Just very quickly, going under the hood, I said I'd just talk about environmental monitoring. We've got about 1,250 sites we measure on a monthly basis. Some of this is telemetered, but we have 43 staff who are out every day of the week monitoring different sites. And we also gather information from other agencies right across the environmental domains. And we collect all that information, and the reason I've put this up here is just to try and explain how we manage that data. So we're required to, under national standards, to ensure that the data is collected in certain ways, and also to make sure the data quality is up to a certain standard. So that's called a National Environmental Monitoring System, oversees that. Physical samples, like water quality samples and so on, are sent off to Hill Laboratories in Hamilton. They are directly connected into our system, so they load data straight in, and so we can make that information digitally available immediately once it's been quality assured. And then we have currently 37 clever people who turn that data into knowledge and information. And we are required to provide a bunch of this information to the Ministry for the Environment and other agencies. We do our own regional state of environment reporting. We provide some of this information to all the councils throughout the region. We do try and make sure information is digitally available these days. And as I said before, it supports some of our policy development, our regulatory activities. For example, if you want to consent a discharge into the environment, say into a waterway, or if you want to authorise a water take, you need to understand the environment that you're discharging into or taking from to be able to consent that. So I've just got a few slides on some of the headline numbers that we're working with and that you need to give consideration of. So currently the Regional Council, well, I say currently, this was actually last year's budget that finished last week. I started this going around councils before last week. $220 million expenditure budget. The biggest share goes into catchment management, which is one of those things that the Head Start proposals say you need to give effect to. The next biggest share is in transport, which you also need to give consideration of. And you can see where the other parts of the spend are in the organisation. I'll just note that community support of $10 million, that includes our governance, our iwi partnership type programs, but it also includes loans that previous councils have taken out, for example, to contribute to the cycling velodrome near Cambridge and to the new regional theatre that's in Hamilton. Of that $220 million expenditure, we collect just under 2/3 of that, $150 million through rates, and a slightly bigger portion of that is in targeted rates than general rates. If we look at the catchment management, we have a group of activities called Integrated Catchment Management within our organisation, and that's the chart that shows the makeup of that. You can see the biggest share is in flood protection, that catchment management, which is the land management and so on, and biosecurity. And most of that is collected from targeted rates. There's a portion collected through general rates, and that's something that's really important to consider, because when you have a look at where those rates come from for the integrated catchment set of activities, you can see the biggest bar there is the Waikato district, and that's because that's where the biggest portion of flood protection systems are effectively. You can see there's a bar there for Taupō district. But the second biggest bar on that diagram is from Hamilton City. And that's because they contribute a lot towards that the general rate portion of what we get, just because of the population basis within the region. So when considering Head Start proposals and considering catchment management, where Hamilton kind of sits in there under our current funding arrangements, kind of affects that the who pays for what and where. And as an example, some of the flood protection systems, some of the catchment management that goes on in the Taupō district will be partly subsidised by Hamilton ratepayers. I can assure you that we don't do that amount of catchment works in the Hamilton reach of the river and catchment. The only reason I put this up is that sitting under that, it gets a lot more complicated. There's something called Project Watershed, which is how catchment activities are funded throughout the Waikato catchment. Depending on the activity, whether it's a flood pump or depending whether it's something to do with land management or whatever, and depending the type of land use, whether it's an industrial land use, a pastoral land use, and urban land use or whatever, there's a different apportionment of how we collect rates within zones. It's quite complicated. We're actually about to embark on a review of that, but it's just to let you know that under the hood further, there's more. I don't think it's important. Probably working more at the next level up, which I showed you, is probably where you'd need to just be giving any consideration in your Head Start proposals. Public transport, the second biggest spend in council. The biggest part of it's in operations, mainly buses. You can see rail is the different colour that's picked out differently there. And there's a smaller amount in policy. You'll have a small portion of that operational in the buses and in the policy space. Yeah, you'll see that in a minute. It's quite small. Just a reminder how public transport's funded. The fees and charges part of the pie there is related to private share or fare box recovery, if you like. once you take that off, it's kind of divvied up. The NZTA provide a 51% subsidy, and the rest we collect through a targeted rate through our regional rates. And if you look at who pays, well, the biggest bar there is the government through the NZTA subsidy. The next biggest bar is Hamilton City, and others is, we now rate. We used to get districts to get their own rating that we would deliver services, help you deliver those services for. We collect it on your behalf now, and that's what the other bars reflect. There is a view by many in the rural areas, and I've heard this through Federated Farmers, that the rural sector subsidises transport in urban areas. That's not true. Well, it's not true for our region anyway. There is no subsidy in that respect, unlike what you saw for catchment. Well, this is where I'm going to finish off. This is my last slide. If Warren was here, he'd probably want to talk to things in greater detail. The only thing I'd say about this is there's currently 200 elected members in the Waikato region, both in mayors, councillors, and community boards and so on. We've been given some thought to, with different proposals which are going on, what might it look like? What might democracy and governance of functions look like with different proposals? Our council's asked us to focus on what, if anybody put up, given we can't put any proposal forward, if somebody put forward a regional single unitary option, and we note that most councils have it in the mix somewhere. Some, it might be their preferred, others it's not their preferred. What might that look like? And Warren would have loved to have talked to that. But I thought, given that you need to consider that for whatever proposals you put forward, you've got to show that it would work from a representation point of view. I thought it just might be useful if Marley, who's our electoral officer, needs to look at our regional representation over time, so thinks about these things at scale. Just some of the work she's been thinking about. Just a few minutes, if that would be possible. Mayor John. Marley.
Kia ora, Chris. E ngā rangatira o te kaunihira o Taupō, tēnā koutou. Ko Māli ahi pene ahau, he uri tēnei no Ngāti Tūwhare Toa, Ngāti Kahangunu hoki. I am from here, and I grew up here in this rohe. And 20 years ago, I started my life in local government here at Taupō District Council. 2 decades, it's hard to believe that time has passed. For the last 15 years, I've been with Waikato Regional Council, and for all of this time in the governance space. And more recently, I've also picked up responsibility for Tauranga Whenua, our iwi relationships area of the business. During this time, I've had the privilege of running a few elections, leading a few representation reviews, and so it's the combination of these things that I've relied on to mock up a governance model for a Waikato wide unitary model, relying on the frameworks that are currently in place for effective representation with some modifications. So what we've heard really clearly through all of the conversations that we've been having really broadly are a number of things. One, the importance of maintaining local voice, and further to that, not just local voice, but devolution of authority so that decisions and power are in local spaces as well. So that is a challenge when you are looking at a council at a scale that spans all of the Waikato. But this model that we're looking at does address that particular issue. So I'll pop it up on the screen shortly, but just to talk about some of the main elements of the model. It starts with territorial authorities as the building blocks and as the communities of interest. It then groups territorial authority areas into larger groupings, and this grouping assists with achieving what is called fair representation, or the number of people that elected members represent being roughly the same. This mechanism is what is quite unique about this model, because under what we see currently in the country is a model that I guess treats population right across the council-wide area together, which means that lower populated areas are often underrepresented, or it's really hard to maintain that local voice in those areas. So these sub-regional areas provide for election at two levels, both the local level and also a council-wide level. And these two areas of governance also allow for governance over functions that are best delivered at scale. And so those could be the functions that are currently managed by regional council, plus any other functions that are better delivered at scale. And then the functions that are best delivered locally, they would sit in the local level. So let me put up on the screen what we've been working on so you can get a better sense of what it could look like. There's a bit of detail in there, so hopefully you've got your glasses on and can read the main elements of what's being shared.
Through the chair, sorry, can I clarify? Yeah, a map would help too. I'm not actually sure what you're talking about.
I don't have a map with me today, but if you could imagine the region, and in this model it is, I guess, grouped into three sub-regional areas. The north-west area would include Hamilton and Waikato councils. The north-east would include Thames Coromandel, Hauraki, Matamata, Piako and South Waikato, and then the southern area would include Waipa, Taupō, Otorahanga and Waitomo. These groupings, they are flexible. They've just been put together as a demonstration of what's possible. There could be more areas, and the councils within them could be a different set. This is all, I guess, able to be changed. It's like the dial. There are some things within this model that are locked in because that's what makes it work. Other elements are changeable.
Marla, are you happy to take questions?
Yes, absolutely.
Councillor Leonard.
I'm just trying to understand, we've got to come up with our proposal.
Yep.
What's this? What is this?
This has been put together, acknowledging that we have not got any mana in the process in terms of putting forward any proposal. But as Chris said, our council right from the beginning has advocated, I guess, for a Waikato-wide single authority. And so what we've found really useful is a model with detail in it to facilitate discussions, to help us with our discussions. We found it really useful.
Why are we discussing this with you guys? Sorry, I'm just trying to understand the purpose of what's going on here. Like we've got a job to do, and I'm struggling with what's going on here. I don't understand this.
Through you, me, John, it's totally up to you. It's just to say that we've been looking at how would representation work, and this is only a model for a single unitary, and was to show that there's as you yourselves look at different groupings of councils that you may, because there's got to be at least two of yourselves to put a proposal forward, might look at, is to show the type of representation arrangements that you might need to consider, and what we've been considering if you look at a single unitary authority, given that's one of the options that we've seen in the media that you said is what you'd consider.
This is,
It's up to yourselves.
Councillor Lander, this is a briefing for us on what the regional council does. But yes, and of the workload they're carrying, so that we're briefed, we know what we're in for.
Could I ask a question about this representation? Because I'm looking at this southern local area there, and you've got Waipa at 6 and Taupō at 4 elected members. That's obviously not population based, is it?
It's based on the electoral population.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Interesting. Say that again. Ah, okay. Didn't know that.
And if I could just give you some feedback as we've gone around councils, obviously nobody really wants to be lumped with Hamilton, because population basis they get diluted in representation very quickly, and Hamilton doesn't want to be diluted, by others in this type of model if it were to happen. There's other, you could put different representation arrangements together, and we've done it. All we're trying to the single purpose of it is not to say this is the model, but this is the sort of thing that you can use, and I'm sure that your staff will be doing that in governance arrangements. But we've just been thinking from that single regional wide, to show that it could work if that's an option that anybody wants to put up.
Councillor Campbell.
Oh yeah, through the chair. Look, I appreciate this. I'll let you know though, I am the only one virtually most sympathetic to the giant supermodel, which you're talking about, which I find interesting, and it is
Please
absolutely
don't
relevant.
speak on my behalf.
well, that's my impression, but no, I'm interested because that obviously is one of the options on the tables, and so you're talking about one unitary authority, but those three, dividing into three areas, the three wards, if you like, is that kind of what you're talking about? Northern, eastern, northwest, eastern and southern?
Yeah, I mean, naming conventions are also up for discussion, so it could be called wards. In this model, we've called the areas within the sub-regions wards. So you'll see there is a Taupō ward, a Waipa ward, a Otorohanga and a Waitomo ward within a southern local area.
But the local areas, I mean, it's a name, there's wards. What is the point of having, there's 10 wards in the whole thing, but I'm just interested in you've divided them into three, because what are you ring fencing something for each?
If I could help, the concept is to be a unitary council, because some councils are trying to look at how they can amalgamate, but they haven't really brought in the whole unitary concept. It's how they bring in regional functions. And I think that regional functions are important to not just think of regional council functions, because some functions could be regionalised. If Warren was here, he'd talk about, say, dog registration. Currently we've got 11 ways of doing it in the region. Do we need 11 different ways of doing it in the region? Or could you register a dog at a bigger scale, as an example? Building services, roading authorities, and so on. So the concept that Marley's been working on here is that there would be elected members at large who would help govern the regional functions. There would be local representation at whatever scale you wanted to break that up, that would govern things that need to be administered locally. How that delegation of functions would occur would need to be sorted out in any proposals. How the rating would go with it, so that there's ability to rate or spend at that local level with the functions to get around some of the issues that Auckland had, where boards were set up, but they didn't really have the authority to spend the money or dictate how it's collected. That's kind of what the model's trying to do.
Councillor
Can I ask a question about that? Because I'm looking at the southern local area, you've got Waipa, Taupō, Otorohanga, Waitomo, but then at the one council level, southern area only has 2 councils, so there's going to be regions without direct representation at the main table where budgets and strategic direction are directed. Have I understood that correctly?
Oh, I see. When you're looking up at the council-wide
Yeah, so
layout?
there's one council that clearly sets the strategic direction and the budgeting, and that would then set the delegations for those smaller areas. Taupō may not have anyone in there.
Possibly, but whatever...
Not selling it for me.
Possibly, but I guess whatever model you come up with, you're going to have to come up with fair representation, which is currently based on electoral population. So that's what the model has taken and based, I guess, the modelling on. But there might be other, I guess, ways to formulate representation, and I'm sure that you and your staff are starting to think of that now. What is representation going to look like in any model that you're considering and may put forward to the government?
Councillor
Yeah.
Councillor
Yeah.
Greenslade.
Thank you. Very interesting. Are you aware of any support for this?
Chris might be better to answer that one.
For this
model.
particular model, what I could say is that I know there's 3 councils who have engaged an external governance expert to look at this very thing, and she's starting to talk with us about how this would work. Look, we could show you different models of how it might work. This is just to stimulate discussion, how a unitary might work as opposed to how just an amalgamation of 2 existing councils works. So yes, I'm aware of some level of support for this. I'm also aware that there are some councils, and depending if any or how many proposals go forward in the Waikato region, there's some councils are saying, well, could regional functions, which are existing regional council functions, be managed through a CCO or some other vehicle on behalf of all the proposals that go forward? There's a lot of discussions going forward, and then the representation goes back to, well, that's looking like amalgamation of 2 existing or more councils. Does that meet the Head Start proposal? If you're just separating up the regional council functions, and then that would come up with a completely different representation model, because you wouldn't need the elected at large.
Yes, because we're all aware that the regional councils are not able to put forward any models, and so I'm just wondering if there was anybody who picked up this model and was actually putting it forward, because I think we're all acutely aware of the work and the place that the regional councils take in our lives. Extremely important. I'm just going to challenge you on one tiny little thing that you said, Chris, about how Hamilton Council subsidises the flooding. I mean, you manage the water down here so they don't get flooded. Just a point. You said that Hamilton subsidises the flood protection in this area.
I showed the pie graph.
Yeah.
That showed that 22% of the money that goes towards funding all the catchment management activities, it comes from a general rate, and the general rate's collected on a population basis, and because Hamilton's got a reasonable portion of the population, they provide a lot of that of that funding, of that general rate, but they don't benefit directly from that.
They do benefit directly. That's the point I'm making. They do benefit directly.
I'm
If you didn't do it, they would have difficulty. Anyway, that's a beside the point. I was just really interested in this model actually, and whether anybody had seen fit to put it forward. Because if you're not able to put it forward, where is it going to go? How is it going to be presented?
So I think Mayor Fennell, when he goes to the next mayoral forum, it'll be another interesting discussion to see where our council's looking like they're going to land. And I think it's only at that point, because we hear lots of things. I'm aware of 3 councils who are possibly thinking in this space, but they haven't made any decisions.
So for the council, this presentation is on diligent, and it's just one of many things that we have to consider. And that's, I'd heard a little bit of this before, and we thought it was important that all the councils here understand what is ahead of us. And this is just one option of many that we need to look at. Councillor Foreman.
Yeah, I don't think this one was actually on diligent, so it took me by surprise actually. But I am more wanting to ask questions about how, well, knowing that we've already got our proposals kind of locked in to get staff to have a look at, how do we best use this time with you now to understand what we need to be looking at to support the work that Regional Council currently does within our area, because it is, there's some core functions there that really impact on looking after our water and our whenua. And I'm kind of happy if Hamilton's not there, because they won't suck up a whole heap of resources and we can actually start focusing on the source. But that's my point of view. The question though, I want to know from you guys what kind of skill sets that you're currently seeing when you go and talk to councillors. What skill sets are missing that might be actually needed when we absorb those functions of regional council? Because, you know, we don't have any biodiversity experts around the table. There's a whole heap of things that your board currently has that we don't. So what is that we need to be looking at?
To answer that for you, no, here, most of them, and that's why the CCO model, we will probably have to contract it in, is an option.
Yeah, so I guess many of the staff at the Regional Council are specialist technical people. Not all, but many are. And that expertise isn't duplicated throughout the region, which is probably unlike many of the district and city council functions where there's specialists and experts, but they're duplicated in every council throughout the region. So you're right. If there's going to be more than one proposal put up, if there's going to be 2 or 3 or 5 or 6, as it could be, as it currently stands, it would need to be thought, how does that get provided? Now, either there's going to have to be more technical specialists brought in to go around all those councils. You can't just split people up. You know, we as an example, our monitoring staff work right across the region. We don't have one just in each
Sorry,
sort
I'm
of
not
part of the sub-region.
specifically talking about the operational team, because that's another nightmare that we'll need to talk about in another time. I'm actually thinking specifically the governance around the table, because that is very different for the regional council. They actually have more of that environmental kind of expertise at the table in some of those cases.
I'd say our expertise is quite varied around the table.
It is, and just like councillors that sit at district and city district and city councils, the I guess requirement is the same. So they're elected from local areas. They must be on the electoral roll. They must pay their $200 deposit. So exactly the same as any other councillor in the country in terms of the election process used. There isn't any particular list or set of requirements for any of the elected members, although once elected there is a process that we undertake to induct our people and to make sure that they've got the right knowledge, skill set to be able to do the job and do it really well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor
May I
Campbell.
just follow up on the question from Councillor Cameron as well about specifically the 2 members elected to the council-wide layer from the southern area. Whilst this is all population-based, it can be dialed up and down, and so you could double that number and make it 4. And then the rest of the numbers are relative. So the northeast would also increase to 4, and then the northwest would increase to 8. So I just thought I'd point that out, because whilst there are some settings within the model that are fixed, there's a lot of settings that are actually really flexible, and so there's some modifications that can be made.
Yeah, but I think, Councillor Campbell.
Oh yeah, look, I'll just point out, and I've got a question here too, going the other extreme. Look, I'll point out the biggest scepticism of bigger at this table is the loss of local representation and decision making, and so obviously, to my mind, the devil in the detail is getting the governance arrangements and delegated authorities, ring fencing budgets or whatever. That's crucial. I mean, I think that's crucial. Whoever you amalgamate with, but I'll tell you what. The reason why there's not very little support for the bigger thing around here is absolutely that fear of local decision making. But and this gets it. But my next point, obviously, you're pointing out bigger can be better because you get access to more specialised skills regionally. Well, rather than having to duplicate them, everyone has their sort of catchment scientist or whatever. And I can appreciate that. So here's a question for you. Going the other extreme, I'm aware Rotorua actually started their process back in November to become their own unitary authority. I mean, we could go down that path as well, and it's a legitimate path. Do you think, with everything that a unitary authority is expected to do you think it's actually realistic or even cost effective for a place as little as Rotorua or Taupō to take it all on as a small entity?
Answer it, Chris. We're all keen to know.
It's
How would
probably
they know, Duncan?
it's probably exactly what you're trying to work out at the moment when you're looking at different proposals. Some functions there will be probably efficiencies gained, which is the opposite of what you said, by working at a different scale. Some functions there will be inefficiencies gained by working at a smaller scale. It all depends on what you call affordable for your community. I'm sure that the way I describe it, under a single unitary model, you'd go from 12 CEOs in the region down to 1. You'd potentially decrease the amount of upper management you have, but there will be other costs that come with it. We were described something yesterday by someone who worked in an area where they were looking to, this was overseas in England, they forecast $20 million in salary savings by going bigger, but what they hadn't allowed for, every council had a different pay scale. And to equalise it over time, they all brought it up, not down, and so they lost that they more than lost that $20 million in the first instance. So it will all depend on the design and some of the principles and those transition arrangements that are made when doing it. I find it really, it's very hard to answer your question because there's things that you do that I don't have experience in. I can just say by some of our functions which are, they were designed initially in local government to be delivered at a regional scale, and for that reason, the systems have been built around that. I think it would be more expensive to do it at a smaller scale, but that's my personal view.
Thank you, Chris. I guess there's always the option of using a CCO and contracting those services, and particularly if there were 4 entries in the Waikato. So,
Correct.
Councillor Murge.
Thanks. Yeah, tēnā korua. Thanks for coming in and sharing some detail with us around your guys' functions. That's what I'm really interested in. Just a couple of comments and a question. I understand that this is just one concept that you guys are modelling, the single unitary authority. From just by looking at it, I'm not sure how it would simplify things. It seems to be quite, to me, just from looking at it, it seems to be a bit more confusing. And I don't see how this type of model concept would simplify any sort of governance. So that's the first comment. My question around, I guess it's around boundaries. Quite often our territorial boundaries don't align with regional boundaries. My pātai is around, because we are quite unique. The Taupō district is quite unique in that we are actually overlapped by 4 different regional boundaries. In terms of this structure here on the screen, the single unitary authority, are you working off just the regional boundary that the Taupō territorial authority boundary is, are you working within just the Waikato regional boundary that fits within the Taupō district, or are you covering the whole of Taupō? Because what I'm trying to understand is, would you be taking the entire territorial boundary with you into the single unitary authority concept, or are you chopping it in half? What does that look like, and has there been any consideration around that?
Yeah, well, Chris, it's a very good question and great observation, because it's certainly something that we've been thinking about. And Chris and I did have that chat on our drive down today, knowing that this particular matter would be of real interest to our councillors here today. The modelling doesn't have a map, and there's probably a good reason for that, because there are a number of councils within the boundary of the Waikato Regional Council Rohe that are split between regions. So Taupō, also Rotorua, and also Waitomo. These are all matters that will really need to be discussed and clarified through the process of putting forward and together a proposal. The numbers that have been used in this model have relied on the general electoral population within the whole of the Taupō district rohe, because that's the information that we have available. So we're using the best information we have available, and in some cases have to make some estimations. If this proposal or any proposal goes forward, then some real further work will need to be done with regard to landing the boundary, and also the numbers.
Thank you, Marty.
Yeah, and just on that, it's a really important point, observation, because what happens in other regions that also, where the catchments extend into your district, will potentially impact on what the government might or might not want to do. If the government decides out of these to protect catchment boundaries to the extreme, there could be change. And if anything happens, there's going to be change, because no existing council will remain as it is. And we're not sure what other regions are going to be proposing, and we're not sure what the government's going to do with it. But what we've done for simplicity is just keep within the territorial authorities as they currently exist.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor Cameron, you have another question?
Well, that might have actually answered some of my questions, actually, but I guess while we're here, I'm looking at the council-wide functions, and you've sort of got what territorial authorities are currently looking after on the right-hand side. So under this model, that would all be set, budget, strategic direction would all be set at that main council table. Is that the premise behind? I'm just looking at it in red. Is that a warning?
Yes, well, the reason it is in red is because those are the functions that TAs currently are responsible for, and possibly the better ones, I guess, that are delivered at scale. And so this is all up for discussion, of course, but we thought it would be useful to identify some functions that are better delivered at scale for the conversation. With regard to budgets sitting at that council-wide level, a key, I guess, area for further discussion is exactly that, because there is the potential for this model to include the devolution of those things to the local areas.
But it's going to rely on a majority decision at that table, isn't it?
This model assumes that those things will be locked in through legislation.
In the design.
In the design, yeah. So
Not following that, sorry.
So through the Head Start process, the government has signalled that encouraged councils to, I guess, think beyond what is currently possible through legislation. And so an opportunity is to...
Oh, I see where you're going with that. They may
Yeah.
make changes to the Local
That's
Government Act to be
right.
okay, to be a bit more flexible in that
Yeah.
area. Okay, thank you.
Chris and Marley, thank you for the presentation and the opportunity to hear from you. It is a bit bewildering when we look at the work that you do. But nevertheless, thank you for taking the chance. I know some of you have got some more questions. Please feel free to talk to the team afterwards, but we do need to move on. So thank you very much. We'll just have the closing karakia. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, councillors, and thank you, Mayor, for allowing us to come.